Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, today we are talking about Turbo. We will update you on the price and everything else. We'll also be looking at Bitcoin just for a little bit because it actually does have a lot of relevancy for our coin. Yesterday, we were talking about how, I believed Bitcoin was going to retrace, right? When we would looked at something like Bitcoin, if we take away even the wicks, just to make it more simple, on the 4 hour time frame, we were creating, lower and lower highs consistently. And even though technically this is a higher low over here in this context, there was enough lower highs to the point where I was like, okay, well, this is just gonna break apart because there's more data suggesting it was going to go down because we were struggling to go further and further up each time, and because of the CME gap. So the gap got filled, right? There's no other gaps at the moment, but we did talk about how, scenario one is we just fill the gap and reverse right away. Or scenario two is actually where we get a little bit further of a pullback, maybe roughly down to 80K before we continue going up. Now, this translates perfectly to Turbo because we gave Turbo some points, right? Not only did we break down that, hey, on the 4 hour, we have a triple rejection and that we are closing lower and lower, but we did say, maybe potentially if it's very weak pullback, we could be looking at this first rectangle. And if it's not, we could be looking all the way down here, even possibly at the 0.002. So, that is how things are looking at the moment. I will say this looks absolutely diabolical in terms of the weekly candle closes and the rejection, right? It looks absolutely diabolical as if it wants to at least go further down, maybe to this low over here. Now, I will say, very, very important times are coming ahead. We do have the weekly candle closing, but not only the weekly, we also have the monthly, and not only the monthly, the quarterly candle, which will indicate and dictate a lot of things. So that is just a couple of days away. And, we will be seeing how everything plays out over the next few days. So we also did talk about how, there was a big pump a couple of days ago, but the daily candle closed very, very weak. We can see, we were at one point at 0.0027 practically, and we closed at 0.002335, right? So pretty weak close. And then we talked about how the last few, candle closes have been pretty poor, if I do say so myself, which is obviously why the price dropped because we were losing momentum, and Bitcoin was also looking absolutely weak. So it just makes sense why price dropped the way it did. And yeah, we can see, right? This daily candle was weak. The last two have been very, very weak, and now we just had a sell off. I will say, like I said, I do think the most probable area of retracement is somewhere over here. Now, in case we do start breaking below, you know, the next area would have to be here, right? Would be here. I do overall expect April to kind of be, if anything, like a little liquidity sweep, right? It might just sweep a little bit short term, but overall, I expect April, May, June to be the months of sideways movement and recovery. That is what I generally expect. And I expect this summer to be fantastic. Okay. I expect July, August, September to be really, really great, even potentially going all the way until the end of the year. That is what I personally think. Even when we go to something like Bitcoin dominance, we talked about this yesterday too, that I expected Bitcoin to go up, Bitcoin to go down, Bitcoin dominance to go up, and that's exactly what's happening, right? Every day that Bitcoin does go up, we are one step closer, right? The next relevant step for us, this is very relevant for Turbo because this when Turbo is going to peak, is when, pretty much we have to get to this point. There'll probably be a little bit of sell off. People are probably going to be super happy, and then we're going to continue pushing up, right? We will be continuing to push up most likely to roughly 69 to 70%. Once we get there is probably where we have a decent crash and break of structure, which will already be very good for altcoins, probably some sideways movement, and then a huge crash down. That is when Turbo will be in its prime, okay? So remember this. Obviously, we'll cover this on the channel consistently, right? We'll do daily uploads, But that is when Turbo will be in its prime, ladies and gentlemen, is when we get something very, very similar to this. Now, at this current moment, I do believe, we are somewhere like in this stage over here where we have, to get to one of the last relevant highs, and then we're going to create, more relevant highs, and then, break of structure, sideways movement, massive sell off, right? So, you know, if we count going back to this as step one, then going back to here, like somewhere up here, right, in this zone, step two, then break of structure, step three, sideways movement, step four, sell off, step five. So we still have 5 steps to go. But honestly, there's only like 1 or 2 steps that are kind of like the ones that being like altcoins might struggle, might not pump as much, right? Getting to 64% and then getting to like that 70%. That is, those first 2 steps are going to be, less wow for our altcoins. And then the other 3 are going to be fantastic, especially the final one. So that is pretty much the blueprint for Turbo and its success. We will dive into the market cap, ladies and gentlemen. We will dive into the volume, and we will dive into other things as well. There is no new news. We are back at 150 million market cap, roughly 253rd place, 43 million volume. So not bad, not bad. Overall volume has been, lower generally the last few weeks, as it's been expected, because I do believe overall we will be consolidating, generally speaking, and we will be looking to be recovering. Bullish sentiment still at 91%. Absolutely love to see that. If we go to the Ether scan, ladies and gentlemen, we can see that we are already reclaiming some holders. Saturday is most likely going to be very, very slow, as it usually is, unless there's some very, very big news that comes out of nowhere that affects Bitcoin massively. But overall, ladies and gentlemen, it should be fairly solid. Remember that we are, once again, not only ending the weekly, not only ending the monthly, but we're also ending the quarterly candle. So yeah, exciting times ahead. The worst should be over. If anything, in the beginning of April, the first week or two might be a bait. That is what I expect. That is what I generally expect. So that is my bias. That is my analysis. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you agree. Let me know if you still are buying Turbo. Let me know what is up. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys did enjoy, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye. All right, I lied. Something that was very, very important that I need to start covering is pretty much the others chart. Okay, this is very, very important for us because this is relevant, because this is our dominance. Okay, this excludes the top 10 coins for dominance. We are currently at 8.50%, which is fairly low. We've already been at one point in this cycle at even 12% dominance. So yeah, I mean, like even last year, around the nice peak, we were at 13.5%. So we can see that this is down. Now I do expect this overall to be sideways. That is what I generally expect. Maybe the lowest dip will be somewhere to this, 7.9%. If I am wrong, ladies and gentlemen, then we will go down here. But after that, we should not be going any lower, right? So, if we do get baited, right? If we are in a scenario where we're kind of like over here, right, where we get something very, very similar, and then we get something like this, and then we get a big dip and then quick recovery. That is exactly what I expect to play out. So just keep in mind, and if that's going to be the case, then Turbo and everything will crash even much, much lower. But overall, the point is that we are closer for things to recover than we are further, and I just cannot wait for those days to be happening. Obviously, confirmation bias always helps in mental. I still believe we are on track. I just believe, some of us bought a little bit too high. Listen, have some hope. Look at the charts, look at the data. Everything will be fine.